What's up, everybody? Welcome back to First Round Frenzy. Matt and Kole here, and today we finish up the East Coast. We got the NFC East this time around. Uh, they've had a lot of names: the NFC Beast, the NFC Least. We don't really know what they are today, but we're going to be going through team by team. Discussing how these teams are going to attack the rest of the off season and how going into the draft, how this division may look going into next season. So Cole, this is a fun one. There's some really good teams and some really bad teams. So
Yeah,
it's
man.
it's an exciting one to talk about.
We got the lowest of the low in the New York Giants. He was a 3-14 team last year, and then we got the Super Bowl champs, the highest of the high in this division. So it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, so let's get right into this. We've had two teams in this division kind of in the news over the past 2 days. We'll start
hmm
with the Dallas Cowboys, who are in the news today. Could be all smoke. We'll see if it's correct or not, but there have been rumors of them potentially trading Dak Prescott to the Cleveland Browns. We can start with that real quick. How likely is that, Cole? How likely is Dak Prescott heading to Cleveland?
What is like wild scenario? Dak goes to Cleveland. Dallas gets number two. Dallas takes Abdul Carter number two, trades Micah Parsons, and then trades for Joe Milton from New England. If we're getting wild, let's get really wild
I mean, we
here.
are talking about Jerry Jones here. Anything is possible. So, the Cowboys are a team that, when you look at them, they should be competing to get into the playoffs every single year. You're looking at
What team
Dak
they
Prescott.
have?
Like you're looking at Dak Prescott, you're looking at CD Lamb, you're looking at a solid defense. There's some holes, but it's not the worst in the league. Um,
hmm
but they definitely have some things to fix up. So let's get into this real quick. When we look at the Dallas Cowboys, there is some shakeup in the coaching staff this year. Obviously, hired Brian Schottenheimer to be their head coach this year after letting go of Mike McCarthy. Clayton Adams is the new OC taking over for Schottenheimer. He's from Arizona. So we'll see how that works out with potentially Dak. And then Matt Eberflus, obviously, the defensive coordinator. So it's an interesting group running this under the always entertaining Jerry Jones. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the backroom staff of Dallas has improved tremendously. We'll see. Schottenheimer could be a very interesting head coach candidate. He's had success as an offensive coordinator in the past. We'll see. But I'm not too confident in their ability to be better than what Mike McCarthy was last year.
Yeah, I'm not overly confident with this group, but like Schottenheimer, you keep the consistency. Eberflus is a proven, really good defensive coordinator when he's in that defensive coordinator role. So I think that defense will be fine with him. And I like, the addition of that coordinator from Arizona because he's going to be like really their running game coordinator. I know he's offensive coordinator, but he's going to be in charge of the running game. You let Schottenheimer do the pass and the overall offense. So interesting to see what happens there out of that backfield with the running backs they've added into it. Javonte Williams and I think it was Miles Sanders might have
Yep,
been the other one
Miles
that they
Sanders.
added. Yeah, Sanders. So yeah, those two backs coming in, trying to keep it going after letting Rico Dowdle walk and Zeke hit free agency as well. So that offense will be interesting, but I think the defense will be just fine with Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting. That's great transition here into how they've handled free agency. I would say it's very mediocre. Um,
It's the
you know,
Cowboys.
like they started off re-signing Osa Odighizuwa. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I don't know.
Yeah.
Their interior defensive line, so that was really solid. But the main problem is they lost Zach Martin to retirement,
Mm.
who's one of the best interior offensive linemen of our generation. Like amazing. You lose DeMarcus Lawrence, who's one of your most effective pass rushers behind Micah Parsons. You lose Brandon Cook, so now you have no wide receivers. Both your backup quarterbacks are either still in free agency or have signed with another team, and you don't know if your starting quarterback is still going to be here next year. You also lost Jordan Lewis, your one of your star corners from the past few years. So they lost a lot, and Rico Dowdle, who you already mentioned. So
Yeah.
they lost a lot. And I feel when I'm looking at this, at the players that they brought in, Dante Fowler Jr. is a very capable replacement for DeMarcus Lawrence. I think that was a solid signing there. Brings in some experience, and it means you don't have to go in early in the draft to go and get a player of value there. I think you mentioned Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. When I'm looking at Brian Schottenheimer, he's a guy that likes to use a strong run game. I do not see them using a strong run game if Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams are the backs.
Yeah.
I was high on Javonte Williams coming out of college, but he hasn't really shown that even in a committee, he hasn't shown to be consistently effective. And Miles Sanders, we all know, has been extremely inconsistent. So we don't know about that. Then you add on your two wide receiver signings are Cavante Turpin and Paris Campbell. So when I'm looking at this team, especially on the offensive side of the ball, there's just a lot of placeholders. There's
Right.
no one that's, going to take this team to the next level. And the same can be said on the other side of the ball. Kenneth Murray and Jack Sanborn as linebackers, solid players, solid depth, no stars. You're looking at Khair Alam, highly graded out of Florida, hasn't done anything in his career so far of note. Peyton
Mhm.
Turner, the surprise first round pick by the Saints, hasn't
Also
really
never
done
done
anything.
anything.
Like you're looking at this list of players that they brought in. Solomon Thomas, interior defensive line, another highly rated player that hasn't really done anything. So it's a lot of unproven players that have
Right.
come into this team to try to compete with two of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, it looks like a team that already used up all of its money and wants to build through the draft and address all their needs to the draft, which is the opposite of what 31 other teams around the NFL would ideally like to do. It's an interesting model that they're taking this year because this, like you said, that like when you have Dak Prescott, when you have CeeDee Lamb locked up, you still have Micah Parsons on the roster. Just having those three should put you in, contention in a weak NFC conference.
Yep.
And yet they missed playoffs last year. Dak went down. If you have a healthy Dak, you're back in contention, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, this all is going up to the draft. I mean, they need a wide receiver two to CeeDee Lamb. They need a running back. They need a replacement for Zach Martin. So it's heavy on offense, I think, is the key here for Dallas in this draft to try to fill in those pieces. Like you said, they just have a lot of stop holders right now that they need to replace with some actual, tangible talent that can make this team better.
Yeah, and I think the big thing you mentioned there is, the other 31 teams not building through the draft. And you emphasize that with the fact typically when you're paying your star players as much as you are, you typically say that's our window to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You're paying CeeDee Lamb, you're paying Dak Prescott, you're paying Micah Parsons, you're paying all of your best players right now. What you're supposed to do is build a team around them so that you can compete because in 3 years' time, most of those guys might be gone, and then you're restarting again. So we'll get into the draft here for the Dallas Cowboys. They've got 3 picks in our third 3 round mock draft that we're doing number 12, number 44, number 76. They have 10 picks in total, I believe, in the whole draft. So let's look at the 4 players that I chose to be contenders for pick number 12 in the first round. And for me, it's heavy on offense, 4 players, 2 positions. Matthew Golden out of Texas, wide receiver. Tatero McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. Ashton Genty, running back out of Boise State. And Omarion Hampton, running back out of UNC. I think it's very clear that the Cowboys should go offense here. I think, obviously, we talked about the very low chance that they do trade with the Cleveland Browns, then we don't know what's going to happen. Do they go with a Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter? Do they go with a Shedeur Sanders? But if they're sticking at 12, I think they have to go with whoever they think is the number 1 wide receiver or who is the number 1 running back.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what the argument has to be. Do they get a Matthew Golden? Is, Abdul Carter going to be there? Do they reach and take Amari and Hampton? There's a lot of different options that the Dallas Cowboys can do. I think it has to be running back or wide receiver. I would agree with that first pick.
Yeah, and one just before we get into the mock draft, one potential surprise pick there could be a guy like Tyler Booker. Obviously you're looking to potentially replace Zach Martin. And we talked about this in our top 50s and in our offensive line rankings. The top 4, maybe 5 interior offensive linemen are really strong, but then after that, there's a lot of question marks.
Yeah.
So, if you want to go out and replace him with someone that can be your everyday starter for the next 5-10 years, you might want to go and get him in the first or second round. So that's another thing to look out for if you are the Dallas Cowboys. But let's get into this mock draft. As I mentioned, pick 12 in the first round, pick 44 in the second round, and pick 76 in the third round. And for me, I went with Matthew Golden with pick 12. I think it makes the most sense. You get the in-state guy out of Texas. I think a lot of people have become very high on him over the past few weeks. Obviously, he had a great combine, but I think a lot of people he flew up people's boards just in the past few weeks. And I think when you're looking at a guy that could potentially be a great Robin to CeeDee Lamb's Batman, Matthew Golden's kind of that guy. You know, he's great route runner, sure hands, and he's going to be a very explosive player. At number 44, I go with Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. I think there's the possibility that they could go running back in round one, but I think there's becoming a growing consensus that Ashton Jeanty is going to go in the top 10, whether that's to the Raiders. You know, DJ obviously said yesterday maybe the Patriots at 4 could be a suitor for Ashton Jeanty as well. So the choice is, do we reach for Omarion Hampton, or do we go in the second and third round and get a running back that could potentially be just as good, if not better? So we go get Quinshon Judkins, who's a very capable running back and a very similar play style to Hampton. And then finally at 76, they have a need at corner, and I go Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State. He's a guy that was in my top 10 on the positional rankings, and I think there's a bunch of options for them here at 76. I mean, we're looking at Darian Porter. We're looking at Jalen Smith. We're looking at Jacob Parrish. We're looking at a bunch of guys that could end up dropping or coming into this pick good value. I just went with the guy that I think could potentially be a number one outside corner for them, and that's Jacob Parrish.
Yeah, and that fills a lot of their needs. I think Harris fits that defense, the zone scheme that Matt Eberflus likes. You get a talented running back in Quinshon Judkins, another Ohio State running back going to Dallas. It worked the last time when they got Zeke. So why not, go back to that pool again? And then, like we said, Matthew Golden, he's like would be a perfect wide receiver too to what CeeDee Lamb brings in your offense.
Yeah, so. and that's the Cowboys. I think it's pretty straightforward for them of what they need to do. The question is, which direction do they go? Do they go running back first? Do they go wide receiver first, etc.? And we'll see what happens. But let's move to the other bad team in the NFC East. Lots of holes to fill. Also been in the news. Just signed Russell Wilson yesterday after signing Jameis Winston. And still, Shedeur Sanders is still somehow the consensus pick for them at number 3. So, Kole, I don't think they need a quarterback anymore after potentially drafting Shedeur at 3. Go through the rest of what the Giants might be doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to start with the quarterbacks because it's interesting, like you talked about. Like, there's a very clear scenario where they go into this with Russell, Jameis, and Shedeur, which is insane. But desperate times call for desperate measures. And this owner, Jim Mara, is fed up with Joe Schoen and with Brian DeBall. I mean, he's fed up with your GM and your head coach. Both of them honestly should have been fired this year. There's no reason that after a 3-14 season with no quarterback plan, you didn't really do much in free agency, that you run it back with the same group again. I mean, how fed up was he letting, the owner when they let Saquon Barkley walk? And then you let Xavier McKinney walk last year too. You're your leader in that secondary. And then you don't really do anything with it. You go 3-14. Saquon Barkley wins a Super Bowl. Xavier McKinney's, was in the Defensive Player of the Year running all season long in Green Bay. Like, the frustration is reasonable. And they're just going, insanity. We're going to run it back and get Russell Wilson and get Jameis Winston and draft Shedeur Sanders and think that's going to help. It's not going to help. I mean, they had a 3.5 win percentage starting this week for the season. They signed Russell Wilson to be their starter, and they still have a 3.5 win percentage on the season, or win projection on the season. Like, so you're in the same exact spot you were last year. You have 3 wins. It doesn't make any sense what the Giants are doing. They need to gut this entire fish and move on from it. But I did like some of their offseason moves. I mean, up until getting Russell Wilson, Darius Slayton, re-signing him was huge. He was one of the top wide receivers on the market. Paulson Adebo, one of the top corners on the market. Javon Holland, the top safety on the market. They brought in really good players. And then, Greg Van Roten came back at guard. James Hudson comes in at tackle. Chauncey Golson on the defensive end. That replaces, Azeez Ojulari, who you lost. So they did a good job up until this quarterback situation. And, they tried to get Rodgers. It wasn't going to happen. He's not going to go there. So at this point, they can't afford to miss out on a great player, and they can't afford to miss out on getting this quarterback position right. So does that mean getting the best player at three, or does that mean taking another swing at quarterback and by training camp, you just let all three of these guys duke it out? I don't know what the answer is, but there's not going to be one in 2025. The answer is going to come in 2026 when this team tanks and, cleans the entire house out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what the Giants end up doing at three because right now, I mean, is there a quarterback competition between Russ and Jameis, or is Russ the starter? Like,
Russ said he's a starter.
I mean, but the thing is, I mean, if you look at the quarterback play over the past 2 years, they're equal. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like, yes, Russ is a Super Bowl winner, but that was 10 years ago, right?
Hmm.
So, you look at this, you have Russ and Jameis, two older quarterbacks who have both had, obviously, Russ, a really great start of his career, really big decline over the past few years. And then Jameis, who's just been floating by through the NFL over these years, somehow getting starting jobs all the time and throwing picks all the way. But I think it'll be really interesting because personally, I think Travis Hunter is probably the pick at three if he's available. I think, you put him and Malik Neighbors as wide receiver 1, 2 with Darius Slayton as wide receiver 3. That gives you a much better chance of being somewhat competent on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
And then next year, I mean, in my opinion, I haven't gone through the tape a lot, but you're looking at a lot more potential starting quarterbacks next year coming out, especially if Arch, John Mateer, and some of those Lenore Sellers, some of these other sophomore quarterbacks decide to declare next year instead of staying one more year in college. So
Hmm.
I think for the Giants' sake, even if they get 6 wins and they end up with like the 10th or 11th pick, I think there's still a great chance that they get a starting quarterback next year.
Yeah. And I think that's the direction that they need to take. I'm not completely sold on Shedeur Sanders. I'm not completely sold on taking him three by any means, no matter who the team is, or two to Cleveland or
If Cam Ward's
regardless.
available at three, do you take him?
Yeah, oh yeah, Cam Ward's there,
Okay.
but
Yep.
he's not going to be there. And the Titans aren't trading out of one, so that's out of the question. You're not
Yep.
moving up to one anymore because that was also a conversation in New York, is whether or not they can move up to one. I mean, can they trade back? That's interesting. If someone wants Abdul Carter at three and they don't want him, they don't like Shadeur, they can, why not move back and add more picks because you're planning for the future anyways. But we'll segue right into it. My 3 round mock draft. I'm not going Shadeur. I think they're going to most likely take Shadeur, but for me, I can't pull the trigger on my end and do it. It doesn't make sense after getting Russell, after getting Jameis, even if they're both on 1 year deals. So I'm going, like you said, with Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter fits that offense well. You got, now Darius Slayton, you have Jalen Hyatt, you have, of course, Malik Neighbors as number one. You add Travis Hunter in there. You don't have to rely on him being dominant on offense. You just sprinkle him in. You got Wan'Dale Robinson as well. And then on the defense, you don't have to rely on him being your starting corner because you got Paulson Adebo. You got more talent there that they came in through the draft with. They just drafted Andrew Phillips, who was pretty good last year. And then, so, you can have him come in, be your cornerback 2, cornerback 3 on defense. I think that just makes sense. He's the best player available. And, you got 2 really strong edge rushers already. I'm not going to go Abdul Carter. So I'm taking Travis Hunter 1, or excuse me, 3 in the first round. Second round, pick 34. I'm going to go Jackson Dart.
All right. That was going to be my
I,
question. I was going to ask
yep.
you. All right.
I think that makes a lot more sense than taking Shadeur at 3. Take Jackson Dart 34 if he falls to the second round. If not, see how the board falls opening up day 2. But I don't know if there's if the Steelers get Rodgers. I don't know that they get Jackson Dart. Seattle might, Rams might. It's all a might on Jackson Dart in the first round. So right now, I'm not seeing it. I'm going to go early day 2, take Jackson Dart, groom him. If you want to throw him in eventually, if both start stinking up, Russell and Jameis,
Yeah.
and you want to save your job if you're Brian DeBall, then you throw in Jackson Dart. And then pick 65 in the third round. I'm going to go Tate Ratledge. Give me a big dog on the offensive line. A Georgia Bulldog at guard on the interior, I think helps this team a lot. They got John Runyon at left guard and then Greg Van Roten coming back at right guard. I think you can upgrade over either guy at that, either position. So I like Tate Ratledge in the third round as an option for the Giants.
Great mullet on Tate Rutledge. So great,
Yeah.
great, great vibes coming in there. And Jackson Dart's an interesting one because I think more and more it's becoming more and more likely that he's going to be a first round pick. If you're the Giants and are you considering trading back into the first round to get Jackson Dart? Or are you saying, all right, if he's not here, someone decides to take him in the first round, we'll go and get a Tyler Shuck or a Kyle McCord or whoever in the third, fourth round.
Yeah, I think I'm not moving up for a quarterback by any means if you're the Giants. I don't think that they can afford to do that with how their roster is. They need to keep their picks. I mean, if your quarterback of your future is not there in the first round and you don't like Shador, you shouldn't be trying to leverage your play for QB 3, 4, 5, 6 in this class by any means. If one doesn't fall to you early on, I'm not taking a swing on Will or Kyle McCord or Will Howard or Tyler Shuck by any means. If it gets to that point, you just pivot to 2026. But if he falls in your lap at 34, I'm for sure going to take Jackson Dart if he's on that board.
Yeah. So let's move on. We've gotten through the tough part of the NFC East. Now we go to the contenders. And let's start with the Washington Commanders.
Okay.
Obviously, great season under rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels. Offensive rookie of the year, absolutely amazing. And they've come in and they've got some holes to fill though. They, despite a strong season, I think they played better than they actually were talent wise on the field. I think they've got some holes at the wide receiver position. I think they have some holes in the secondary. And they can definitely improve this roster, especially when they have to go head to head with the Eagles twice and then go into the playoffs and probably face them again. So when we're looking at what they did, first of all, in the offseason, they brought back some key players. Zach Ertz brought him back. Brought back Bobby Wagner as well. And when we go into what they actually did, the biggest one, the trade for Deebo Samuel. They go out, they get him, veteran player, a guy that's going to be a gadget guy. I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to have a lot of fun with him on his offensive,
Oh yeah.
in his offensive system there. And then they also went and got Laramie Tunsil, left tackle. So they improved their offensive line to protect Jaden Daniels. I think that was another potential issue going into 2025. They got a franchise left tackle in Laramie Tunsil. So I think overall, so far, the Commanders have done a very good job building this team through free agency. They had two big splashes in Tunsil and Samuel, and then
hmm
they just kind of went along, put some players in there. You get a Javon Kinlaw to get some depth at defensive line. You get Jonathan Jones to get some depth in the as defensive back. And then you go out and get KJ Osborne because you really don't have any other receivers behind Deebo, McLaurin, and McCaffrey.
Yeah.
So, you still need some reinforcements, but I think they're going into the draft saying, we feel confident that we're going to be in the playoffs next year. Now let's go get the difference makers for us to be even better.
Right. Yeah, and last year they were, very particular with who they were bringing in. They brought in all the ones that fit Dan Quinn's, mold of a player and on his defense. Cliff Kingsbury kind of just, we were going to see what his offense was with Jane Daniels, which was tremendous. And now they added in the pieces. They go out and they get, their joker in Deebo Samuel, who's going to be really good in that offense and giving him a different dynamic and all the other different moves that they made to get that position where it is. And I think that the coaching wise is great. Cliff Kingsbury's going to get the most out of his offense. Dan Quinn's going to get the most out of his defense. It's a perfect marriage of those two coaches together
Yep.
and working together. And it's, evident. This team was in the NFC Championship game with a rookie quarterback. And right there, trying to go, shot for shot with the Eagles who went on to win the Super Bowl. Washington's in a great spot. If they nail this draft, they got a really strong left tackle now for Jaden Daniels. If they can nail this draft, I mean, they're sitting in a very, very good spot.
Yeah, so let's go into the draft here. They've got pick 29, obviously made it to the NFC Championship game. Very, very solid season. They're going to be looking to draft best player available. I think Adam Peters, he has a tendency to do that. He loves his athletic uh, prospects, and he loves high potential. He loves to see upside in players. I think their perfect pick. He's not in my four. I think his ideal pick would be that Shamar Stewart drops to 29. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think when you look at that, first of all, they need an edge rusher, right? They lost Dante Fowler to division rivals, um, and they need someone to come in and potentially fill that void. And when you look at the Adam Peters tendencies, best player available, probably Shamar Stewart if he drops to that point. Extremely athletic, and he's got tremendous upside if they can get the best out of him. So I think that would be their ideal pick, but I don't think he's going to be there. So
Mhm.
my four players that I have there, three defensive, Donovan Ezeraku, edge rusher out of Boston College, Mike Green, edge rusher out of Marshall, Maxwell Harrison, cornerback out of Kentucky, and then my one offensive player, it can be a bunch of guys. I just chose Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. I think it can be a few different wide receivers, really whoever they feel is number one on their board. I think they're going to end up going defense with this pick. But if their top receiver is available to them at 29, I would not be surprised if they went out and got him.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty solid.
So let's go into the mock draft. They only have two picks, so it's kind of
Yeah.
boring.
Okay.
29 and 61. 29. I ended up going Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. I think they need an edge rusher more than anything on that defense. Someone to pressure the quarterback and take a little bit of pressure off that secondary. I think there's enough. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they end up trading up into the second or third round to get another one of those highlight players that we keep talking about in that 20 to 65 range. So would not be surprised there and go and get one of their secondary players there, whether it's a corner or a safety. But I think Donovan Ezeraku is extremely athletic, extremely productive in college. I think he's probably going to be best player available at the edge rusher position at 29. I think Mike Green is probably gone by then. If he drops, would not be surprised if he's the pick. And then at 61, I went Jaden Higgins. I went and got them a wide receiver, good outside receiver, could potentially be a big slot, but I think Deebo Samuel is not exactly what they need on the outside. He's going to be
Right.
their gadget guy. He's going to be, when we're talking about draft prospects, he's Luther Burden of this draft class, right? So I think you go out there, get a big physical wide receiver opposite of Terry McLaurin, and you put him on the outside, and he's just a jump ball target for Jaden Daniels. So I really like that pick there.
Yeah, I think Higgins would really fit that offense really well. I mean, like you were just saying, as the outside guy, that's great. And I mean, that's what I was talking about. You get that one last piece of that wide receiver spot, and that offense is going to be super, super
Oh yeah,
lethal. So whether it's Jaden Higgins or someone else on the outside, finding that outside guy is going to be key. And I think, it's going to be that second or third round guy, I guess only the second round, right? Didn't have
second
the
round.
third
Yep.
round pick. Yeah, so second round pick, yeah, that would make sense for them to go wide receiver there. And then I think probably address that defense in the first round.
All right, now we move on to the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Kole, I'll let you take this one. Uh,
Okay.
there's not many holes on this
Mhm.
roster. They have built it extremely well. So let's see, Kole. What's your analysis? How have they attacked this offseason, and what do they need to do in the draft?
I mean, yeah, I think that there's going to be and if you mark like a 5-year roster development in league history, this is probably the best ever. I mean, and if you put a GM again, the next GM to go into the Hall of Fame has to be Howie Roseman.
Yep.
I mean, what he has done the last couple of years with this Eagles team has been extraordinary, and it's why they've won 2 Super Bowls. It's why they've been to 3 Super Bowls now in like the last decade. Because this team is built for now. It's built for the next 5 years, and it's incredible how this team operates with Howie Roseman running it. Nick Sirianni, say what you want about him, the guy continues to win. I have more naysayers that show about Nick Sirianni, the more wins he's going to keep producing for this team. They're not going to get anybody else. He's just going to keep bringing in stud coordinators and let them run the job, and he's just going to be the cheerleader that he is for this team because it works. Say what you want. This is a 14-3 team. Last year they were 11-6. The year before that they were 14-3 and lost in the Super Bowl. So this team is absolutely primed to go on a dynasty-like run after winning the Super Bowl and coming into 2025. Their draft class last year was exceptional. They were, one of the best defenses, one of the best offenses. The passing game, I think, can pick up a little bit, and we'll see what pieces they can add to that. But I think with the new coordinator coming in on the offensive side of the ball, they can, get Jalen Hurts back and working on the offense, in the passing game, downfield shots, getting Devonta Smith and AJ Brown the ball. But man, what an addition Saquon Barkley was.
Yeah.
Probably not a better free agent addition that has ever been made in NFL history as well. Just what they were able to do with Saquon coming into it. Like you said, there's not that many needs on this team.
Yeah. I mean, Philadelphia was going to be a good team this year, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
They've shown it. Despite all the doubters, I've been a doubter for a little bit on Jalen Hurts. I'm still a little bit of a doubter on his ability to throw the football, but we'll see. He's only had one good season of that, but I don't think this team wins the Super Bowl without Saquon Barkley. I don't think they're
No.
extremely talented team. They make the playoffs. They probably win one or two games in the playoffs. I do not think they win the Super Bowl without him. I think the Rams win that game if Saquon Barkley isn't on that team. I think I don't think that's crazy either to think. But
Yeah.
you look at it, Saquon Barkley changed that team, and they're going into next season with potentially an even stronger team than it was
Mhm.
last year. I mean, they didn't do too much in free agency. I'll let you talk about that real quick of who they brought in. But I mean, the people they lost, I feel like they replaced pretty well so far.
Yeah, and
Or at
that's
least
like
have a plan to replace.
yeah, and the Eagles always lose a lot of people. I mean, you talk about Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, both corners, and James Bradbury and Darius Slay, but they already had the replacements there. They already had Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as the replacements at that position. So Howie Roseman knows, like, he's like 5 years ahead of what his roster is currently doing, and like drafting their future replacements, building those guys up. But Mekhi Becton was another one that walked away. Brandon Graham retired. Losing Big G is BG is huge off the edge. But then they bring in Azeez Ojulari. They bring in Josh Uche. At running back, they brought in Quadzilla to make their already ridiculous tush push. All right, Packers bias aside, ban that play. But AJ Dillon, you got the two biggest quads of the running back room in the NFL, and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Get rid of the tush push. That's absurd. But either way, like Howie Roseman thinks big picture. He thinks the future. He's not afraid also to trade around the drafts, which makes the Eagles always an interesting team. You don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to move up and get a guy? They're going to move back and get a guy. They got an arsenal of draft picks. They are a comp pick king. I mean, it's like 12 picks in the next 2 years or something ridiculous. Maybe more than that. I don't remember what it is, but it's something absurd number of the picks they have in the next couple of years to keep building this thing. So the draft's going to be interesting. What they do here. Everyone likes the D line in the first round because they didn't really replace Milton Williams on the inside. They still had two good tackles in Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, both the Georgia guys. So it's just getting a rotational piece back to fill that Milton Williams role, and that's kind of a direction I like. But beyond that, it's anyone's guess what Howie Roseman's going to do in this draft.
Yeah, I think the one thing I do know is he's going to get great value at whatever pick he gets.
Yep.
I
Hmm.
don't have consensus on tap here, but when we look at some of the past few drafts, I personally had Jalen Carter as my second ranked player in the draft. He got picked ninth. I had Nolan Smith ranked as my 13th best player in the class. He got picked 30th. I had Quinion Mitchell ranked as my number 10 player in the class. He got picked 22nd. And I had Cooper DeJean as my 13th ranked player, and he got him at 44. Like, he is going to get
He's a
value,
genius.
whether it is luck or complete skill, whatever it is. No matter who he gets here this year at 32, it is going to be an extremely talented player. We'll get into what you think. I'm getting Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, Donovan Ezraku. Someone drops from consensus and gets into there at 32.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Williams. I mean, you
Michael
never know,
Williams.
never know who's going to fall to the Eagles, but Malachi Starks,
Nicky
another Georgia
Manworthy. I'm
guy.
seeing him still in the back of the first round. I
You
mean,
never know. I
they're
mean,
going to get someone.
they get lucky for sure. There's definitely some luck involved with what they do. So my 3 round mock here, and this is, I mean, I've been torn. I've been tossing different names, who I like and who I don't like. I like Donovan Ezraku. I don't know if I like him enough at 32. I think if they trade back from 32 into the second round, he's your option.
Yeah.
But sticking at 32, I'm going to take Walter Nolan. And I'm going with that D tackle that falls in the first round for whatever reason it may be. The Eagles won't care about it. Give me Walter Nolan at 32 to replace Milton Williams. Have him rotating with Jordan Davis, with Jalen Walker, strong interior front in Philadelphia. The second round, sticking with where they're at 64. This again was interesting. People are saying Jaden Blue out of Texas. Add a running back, a speed guy to that offense would be incredible. But with some rumors of Dallas Goedert, I'm going to go with the tight end. I'm going Elijah Arroyo,
Ooh.
a run after the catch guy, similar to Dallas Goedert, but a guy that in this offense can help take a different dynamic to what they have. You get him the ball and he can make some plays after the catch, and then you have Devonta Smith, you got AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley in the backfield. I like that. That makes it work. If he's Dallas Goedert truly on the trade block either this year or next year, Howie Roseman plans for the future. Get
Yeah.
Elijah
It's
Arroyo
yeah.
now. He's coming off the best year of his college career working with Cam Ward at Miami. And then in the third round, I think this is truly their biggest need is at safety. So I'm going to go with Andrew Makuba out of
Okay.
Texas. So I go with Texas guy here. I think he had a strong pro day this week. What we saw from him and at that event was really good. He said that his versatility speaks for itself. That's something that their defensive coordinator is going to love in Philadelphia and fills that major need because then you start rotating Cooper DeJean around, you start rotating Andrew Makuba around. The only problem I have here though is the lack of corners because you need that number two corner on the outside opposite of Quinyon Mitchell because you're going to keep Cooper DeJean in the slot, keep him down, move him around where you want him. So that's still a major hole for me, but I think, they'll figure it out. Howie will figure something out. And I did like Josh Connerly. I wanted him at 32. I wanted him maybe in the second round. But still, I mean, they have two good tackles in place. Lane Johnson's 34. They re-upped another year on his deal through 2027. So I wanted a big brain Howie Roseman look ahead pick, but I think the tackle would be a next year solution.
Yeah. I think the great thing for the Eagles is they can really do whatever they want and their team's going to be improved, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you and I just a few weeks ago when we did the mock draft 2.0, we're talking about potentially Benjamin Morrison as the pick in the first round or Maxwell Harrison.
Hmm.
I'm thinking potentially second round. You talked about safety Makuba in the third round, maybe a Xavier Watts in the second
Yeah.
round. There's and then obviously you talk about Connerly. There's Charles Grant. There's Arante Ursary, who are all going to be
Hmm.
available in that second round range. They can really do anything and still be Super Bowl contenders next year, potentially even Super Bowl favorites next year, and then still be completely set for the future at almost everywhere. So it'll be really interesting to see how Howie Roseman attacks this draft. If there's some trades involved, does he move up? Does he move back? And what value player does he get?
Yeah, they're definitely going to be moving around the board to some
Oh yeah,
extent. He's going to get more picks however he can. But we'll see. I think safety, cornerback two has to be their two biggest needs right now in terms of starters and finding a starter, and we'll see what direction that takes. I think don't rule out Darius Slay coming back. I think that might be an option once we get after the draft and you don't find a corner there. You bring big play Slay back into the fold.
very interesting. So before we leave, Kole, probably the toughest question we're going to have all season. Does this division change at all next year, or is it going to go exactly the same way as it did last year?
I mean, depends on the Cowboys. I wouldn't rule out them making, if they get back, if Dak's back and this team is firing on all cylinders again. I mean, 2 years ago, Dak Prescott led the league in passing
Yep.
touchdowns
Yep.
with similar or worse weapons. So if Dak's healthy, Dak's ready to go, they might jump Washington, but I don't foresee anyone jumping the Eagles, and I don't foresee the Eagles or the Giants winning more than 4 games.
Yep. Yeah, for me, the NFC East all comes down to injuries, right? I mean, we're
Yes.
looking at a lot of players. I mean, outside of injuries, we're looking at Jaden Daniels going into his sophomore year. Never wish it on someone. I love Jaden Daniels, but there is the sophomore slump. There is such a thing. So you do have to be wary of that. Obviously, Saquon Barkley with a lot of injury concerns over the past few years. What is he doing after a huge season this past year? But yeah, I agree with you. Giants are going to be a top 5 pick next year. I don't think there's any question about that. And then Cowboys just need a few more pieces and Dak healthy. If they can do that, they could potentially get into that second pick. But I'm personally predicting the exact same order as last year.
I
So
will say if there is an injury to a quarterback position, the backup option that would best, work out would be the
It would
Giants.
be the Giants. The
I
Giants
will
are
give them that
best
much.
prepared. They will not, no matter what, if their starter goes down, they will be exactly the same without them. So good on the Giants for that. But that's the NFC East. We're going to be moving into the North next. AFC North on Monday, and then NFC North on
On
Thursday. So we
Thursday.
get to talk about Cole's
Nice.
Packers next week. So excited for that, and we'll see you next week.